Something is happening, quietly, not loudly, not dramatically. No announcement, no public breakdown, no moment where someone decides, that's it, I'm done. Just a slow letting go. Men in their 30s and 40s who used to care deeply about getting ahead, about the house, the career, the promotion, the next level, who spent their 20s believing, genuinely believing, that if they worked hard enough and followed the right steps, the life they were told to want would eventually arrive. And then somewhere in their mid-30s, or sometimes earlier, sometimes later, something shifted. Not a crisis, not a collapse. Something quieter and in some ways stranger. They stopped pushing as hard. Not because they won, because they got tired of a game that kept changing the rules. And here's what's interesting about this. What makes it worth an entire video rather than just a sympathetic nod. This isn't a personal failure. It isn't weakness. It isn't laziness wearing the disguise of wisdom. I think it's something else. Something more complicated and, in certain lights, something almost rational. And I want to talk about what's actually happening, what's driving it. And, because this is what I keep coming back to, what Marcus Aurelius, riding alone in his tent during a military campaign 2,000 years ago, somehow knew about it already. If you felt that quiet shift, even for a moment, even as a passing thought at the end of a long week, this video is for you. Let me describe a morning, not a hypothetical one, a real one that I think many people will recognize. You wake up. Maybe you slept well, maybe you didn't. The alarm goes off, or your body decides it's done sleeping before you're ready. And before anything else, before coffee, before conversation, before you've even fully arrived in the day, the phone is in your hand. And within 60 seconds, you've already processed more social information than your grandfather would have encountered in a week. Your old friend just bought a house, posted a photo of the keys, a caption about new chapters and dreams becoming real. You feel something, a complicated mixture of genuine happiness for him and something else. Something you don't want to name because naming it feels small. Someone from your high school, someone you barely knew, someone whose name you had to look at twice to place, is on a yacht. Somewhere with blue water and sunlight. He's smiling the way people smile when they know they're being photographed. You don't know if the yacht is his or someone else's. It doesn't matter. The image landed and it did what it was supposed to do. Your ex, looking better than ever, with someone who seems, from the 3 photos visible, to be doing very well for themselves. And it's not even 7 a.m. This is the daily reality for most millennials. And I want to spend some time on what makes this genuinely different from any previous generation's experience of comparison, because I think the difference is real and important, and often dismissed as simple complaining. Comparison is not new. Human beings have always compared themselves to others. This is ancient, wired deeply into us. It served evolutionary purposes. Tracking your status within a group helped you make decisions about cooperation and competition that were genuinely survival relevant. What is new is the scale. Your grandfather compared himself to roughly 30 people across his entire life. His neighbors, his co-workers, the people he grew up with, maybe a few dozen others in his social world. This was the natural limit of human community for most of human history, what anthropologists call Dunbar's number, the cognitive limit for stable social relationships, somewhere around 150 people. You compare yourself before breakfast to thousands. And this isn't just more of the same, it's qualitatively different. Here's why. In any group of 30 people, your grandfather's comparison pool, you might realistically be in the top half for most metrics. Better job than some, nicer home than others, more successful relationship than a few. The comparisons were mixed. You were sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. in a pool of thousands algorithmically selected for engagement, which typically means success, attractiveness, achievement, you are almost always behind. Always someone with a nicer home, always someone earning more, always someone with a better body, a more successful career, a more photogenic family. The sample size guarantees it. And your nervous system, which evolved to process comparison against 30 people, is now running that calculation against a pool 50 times larger, continuously, every day. The result is a baseline sense of inadequacy that doesn't feel dramatic enough to address, but is chronic enough to exhaust. A constant low-level signal telling you are behind, you should be further along, something is wrong. And the quiet giving up, the phenomenon I'm describing in this video, I think it starts here. Not in laziness, not in weakness, but in the rational exhaustion of a system running a comparison it was never designed to run at this scale. There's a specific psychological mechanism here that I want to name because I think naming it is useful. Social comparison theory, the research goes back to Leon Festinger in the 1950s, tells us that humans have a drive to evaluate their own opinions and abilities by comparing them to others. And it tells us that we tend to compare upward to people who seem to be doing better when we're uncertain about where we stand. And the experience of comparing upward consistently without compensating downward comparisons produces something called relative deprivation, the feeling that you have less than you deserve relative to your reference group. This feeling is distinct from objective poverty or genuine lack. You can have everything you need, security, relationships, health, meaningful work, and still feel this. Because the feeling is driven by the gap between what you have and what you see others having, not by what you actually need. Social media has created the conditions for chronic, pervasive, inescapable relative deprivation in people who, by any objective measure, are doing reasonably well. And the response, the quiet letting go, the decision to stop competing on terms that can't be won, is, in a strange way, adaptive. It's the psyche saying, I cannot win this comparison on these terms, and I am exhausted from trying. The problem is that the response, the giving up, often throws out things that shouldn't be thrown out. Not just the toxic comparison, but also genuine ambition, genuine aspiration, the real things you actually want to build. Which is why Marcus Aurelius matters here. Because he's not saying, stop caring, stop wanting things, retreat into passivity. He's saying something much more specific and much more useful. Change what you're measuring. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire for nearly 20 years. He commanded armies. He governed hundreds of millions of people. He dealt with plagues that killed a significant portion of the population, with military threats on multiple borders simultaneously, with political betrayal from people he trusted. And every morning, or sometimes in the evenings during military campaigns, in whatever time he could find, he sat and wrote in his journal, the thing we now call the Meditations. He never intended it for publication. We know this because of its character. It's not a polished philosophical treatise. It's a man reminding himself, repeatedly, of the same ideas. Sometimes the same point appears multiple times within a few pages, slightly rephrased. He was not writing for an audience. He was doing the work of keeping himself right, of returning again and again to a way of seeing things that he found useful. And in these private notes, he identified what I want to call 3 disciplines, 3 domains of internal work, 3 areas where, he believed, the real quality of a life is determined. I want to spend real time on each of these, because they deserve more than a quick summary. The first discipline, the discipline of desire. Marcus Aurelius was deeply concerned with what we want and why we want it. Not in a puritanical anti-pleasure sense. He wasn't arguing for the elimination of desire. He was arguing for clarity about what you're actually pursuing. He wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Not is this pleasurable? Not is this impressive? Not is this what successful people do? Is this necessary? Is this actually serving something real?" And this question, applied honestly to the comparison trap I was just describing, is devastating. Is comparing yourself to someone's yacht photo necessary? Is the anxiety produced by your friend's house announcement necessary? Is the low-level competitive tracking of where you stand relative to your entire social media network necessary? Almost none of it is. And yet we do it automatically, constantly, without ever making a real choice to engage. The first discipline is about catching the desire before it runs, noticing what you're reaching for and asking honestly, why? What is this actually in service of? What does it actually produce? The house your friend bought, does your awareness of it change anything real in your life? The yacht photo, does engaging with the feeling it produced move you toward anything you genuinely want? Or does it just cost you something? A portion of a morning? A quiet depletion of something? The discipline of desire is not eliminating desire. It's becoming deliberate about which desires you're feeding. Because you're always feeding some of them, even when you think you're just scrolling. The second discipline, the discipline of action. Marcus Aurelius was obsessed. I don't think that's too strong a word. With the quality of attention brought to individual actions. Not grand actions. Not historic moments. The small ones. The ordinary daily choices that most people make on autopilot. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not to the comparison, not to the regret about the past or the anxiety about the future. The present action, the thing in front of you right now." This sounds simple. It is almost impossibly difficult in 2026. Because the modern environment is specifically engineered. This is not metaphor. This is the actual design intent. To pull you out of the present. Notifications that intrude on whatever you're doing. A recommendation algorithm that is always suggesting something else, something more, something next. The infinite scroll that has no natural stopping point, and therefore no natural moment of presence. You sit down to do something and within minutes, sometimes seconds, something external has claimed the portion of your attention. And the quality of action in that fractured state is genuinely different from the quality of action in a focused state. Not just the output, though the output is different. The experience, the relationship to what you're doing. Whether it feels like you're present in your own life or watching yourself move through it from a slight remove. Marcus Aurelius' second discipline is simply this. Actually do the thing you're doing. Bring yourself to it fully. Make a choice, a real choice, about where your attention goes, rather than letting the environment make that choice for you by default. Do you scroll for another hour, or do you do the thing you've been saying you'll do? Do you have the conversation you've been avoiding, or do you find another reason to delay? Do you bring your full attention to the person in front of you? Or do you give them the partial attention of someone whose mind is also somewhere else? These are small questions. They produce the answer to much larger ones. The third discipline, the discipline of assent, accepting willingly what you cannot change. This is the hardest one, and the most consistently misunderstood. I've heard Stoic acceptance described as passivity, as a fancy philosophical justification for not trying to change things that should be changed, as something that powerful people use to convince powerless people to accept their powerlessness. That's not what Marcus Aurelius was describing. He was describing something much more specific. The distinction between what you can actually influence and what you cannot, and the direction of your internal energy. Because here is a real thing that happens. You spend emotional energy being angry about the housing market, specifically angry. The prices, the conditions, the injustice of it, the feeling of being priced out of something your parents had access to at your age. That anger is real. The injustice is real. The systemic problems are real. And your anger changes none of it. Not 1 cent of housing prices. Not one policy. Meanwhile, while that energy is going outward, towards something unmovable, it is not going to the things you can actually move. Your specific financial situation, the choices within your reach, the skills you could build, the decisions that are genuinely yours to make. The third discipline is not stop caring about injustice, stop wanting things to be better, stop being appropriately outraged by systems that harm people. It is be precise about where your energy goes. Because energy spent on what you cannot change is energy taken from what you can. And in the context of the millennial experience, where there are real, legitimate, systemic grievances, this distinction matters enormously. The grievances are real. The systems failed people. The promises were broken. And you still have a life to live. And choices within that life that are yours. The third discipline is holding both of those things at once. The systemic reality and the personal agency, without either cancelling the other out. I want to stop the philosophy for a moment and be direct about my own experience, because I think honesty is the only reason a video like this is worth making. Anyone can summarize Marcus Aurelius. The useful thing is connecting the ideas to a real life. I'm 38. I have 3 children. I built my income entirely online, in Hungarian, on YouTube, across 5 channels, over several years, from nothing, from a position of significant financial pressure, with a spine injury that makes long hours at a desk genuinely painful, in a small town in Hungary. And there are days, real days, not hypothetical ones, where I look at people my age who took the traditional path and I feel the comparison sting. Colleagues from years ago who have houses, real houses, owned, stable, pensions building slowly but surely, 2 cars, holidays planned, financial security of a kind that, when I'm being honest with myself, I don't fully have yet. And in those moments, the ones I'm describing, I feel it. The question, did I get this wrong? Not as a passing thought, as a real question with some weight to it. And I want to stay with that for a second, rather than rushing past it to the philosophical antidote, because I think the rushing past is itself a kind of dishonesty. The difficulty is real. The comparison sting is real. The moments of genuine uncertainty about whether the path you chose was the right one, those are real. What shifted for me wasn't that the question stopped appearing. It's that I got more clarity about what it was actually asking. Did I get this wrong? by whose measure? When I examine what I actually value, when I get specific rather than general, the picture looks different. I'm here for my children in a way that the traditional employment path would not have allowed. I work on things that I find genuinely meaningful. I have flexibility. Not always, not perfectly, but real flexibility to be present when it matters. I'm building something that is actually mine in a way that accumulates value rather than just trading time for money. The things I don't have, the house, the pension, the stability of the conventional path, those are real absences. I'm not pretending otherwise. They have costs, but they are not the only measure. And for a long time, I was measuring myself on a scale that wasn't mine, that someone else designed, that was never going to produce a result that felt like victory, because it wasn't built around what I actually care about. The question is not, did I get this wrong? The question is, by whose measure? And does that measure actually reflect what I value? That question, asked honestly, changes everything. I want to say something about the difference between recalibration and giving up, because I think this distinction is at the heart of what I'm trying to describe. Giving up looks like abandoning things that matter to you because pursuing them is too hard. Recalibration looks like becoming clearer about what actually matters to you and redirecting your energy accordingly. From the outside, these can look identical. Both involve doing less of something. Both involve a reduced level of visible striving. Both might produce a quieter, less visibly ambitious life. But the internal experience is entirely different. Giving up produces a specific feeling, a sense of defeat, of having been beaten by something, of carrying something unresolved. Recalibration produces something else, not necessarily comfort, the process is often uncomfortable, but a sense of increasing alignment, of your actual life moving toward what you actually value, rather than toward what you were told to value. I've experienced both, and the difference is real and felt. I want to spend some time on the specific historical context that shaped this generation, because I think it gets dismissed too quickly. When people describe millennials as the giving up generation or the entitled generation, which happens, though less than it used to, there's an implicit assumption that the disappointments are personal failures, that the unmet expectations reflect unrealistic expectations, not broken systems. That's worth examining. Millennials, born roughly between 1981 and 1996, entered adulthood during or immediately after the 2008 financial crisis. This matters in ways that go beyond the obvious economic impact. The crisis hit right at the moment when many millennials were beginning careers, buying first homes, starting families. It disrupted precisely the transition that the preceding generation had managed without major obstacles. And the recovery, which was real, which happened, was dramatically uneven. Asset prices recovered and then exceeded previous levels. Stock markets recovered, housing prices recovered, and then significantly exceeded what they had been. But wages, particularly for younger workers in their first years of employment, did not recover at the same rate. The gap between asset prices and wages widened in ways that directly affected the ability to do the things that previous generations had done at similar ages. The median house price in most developed countries is now genuinely out of reach for the median dual-income millennial couple without significant assistance. This is not perception, it is arithmetic. And into this context, of broken promises and shifting goalposts, the comparison engine I described earlier pours images of the people who did manage it. The people whose timing was right, whose family circumstances provided a deposit, whose particular industry happened to do well during this period. So you have a generation that worked hard, followed the rules, and largely didn't get what they were promised, and then watched, daily, algorithmically curated evidence of the people who did. The quiet giving up against that background is not mystifying. It's almost inevitable. But, and this is the Stoic intervention, it is also not the only response available. Because the Stoics were not blind to injustice. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire that contained enormous injustice. Epictetus was literally a slave. The injustice of his situation was as real as it gets. Their point was never, the system is fine, adjust your attitude. Their point was, even inside unjust systems, you have agency. Not over the system, over yourself, over your response, over where your energy goes and what you build within the constraints you're given. The recalibration I'm describing is not acceptance of a broken system. It's a refusal to let the broken system determine your internal state while you figure out what you can actually do. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Not the philosophy, the daily lived version. Here's the concrete version of what Marcus Aurelius was pointing at. Every day, multiple times a day, you face a choice about what you measure. Most of the time, this choice is invisible. It happens below the level of conscious decision, driven by habit and environment. Making it conscious is the practice. There are two primary options. You measure yourself against others, their circumstances, their acquisitions, their apparent progress. This is the default. It happens automatically if you don't actively choose something else. And as I described earlier, it is a game that the design of your information environment guarantees you will lose. Not sometimes, always. Because the sample size is too large and too curated. Or you measure yourself against the earlier version of yourself. Are you making better decisions than you were making 6 months ago? Are you handling difficulty with slightly more stability than last year? Are you building something, slowly, consistently, imperfectly, toward what you actually care about? This sounds like a consolation prize. It sounds like the advice you give people when the real competition is close to them. It isn't. It's actually a completely different game. And it's the only version of the game where the rules remain stable, where your progress is determined by your effort and your choices, rather than by factors entirely outside your control. The whiteboard in my room, I've mentioned it in other videos, has one sentence. Only what you can change. Every morning. Not because I've mastered this, because I keep needing the reminder. Because the pull toward external measurement is strong and consistent, and the environment you live in is constantly reinforcing it. You have to choose, actively, repeatedly, something different. And the choice is not dramatic. It's not a mountaintop revelation. It's a small, daily, often unwitnessed decision. Do I engage with this comparison, or do I set it down? Do I measure this moment against what someone else has, or against where I was? Do I spend this energy on something I cannot change, or on something I can? That's the practice. Small, repeated, invisible, accumulating over months and years into something that actually changes the quality of your inner life. There's one more thing I want to say here about what recalibration actually produces, because I think it's important and often left out of these conversations. It doesn't produce contentment in the passive sense. It doesn't produce the feeling that everything is fine. It doesn't eliminate ambition or the desire to build things or the discomfort of genuine difficulty. What it produces, when it's working, is a cleaner relationship to your own effort. You work toward things because they matter to you, not because you're trying to beat someone else's visible progress. You rest without guilt because you're not in a race with an external clock. You face difficulty without the extra layer of shame that comes from comparing your hard moment to someone else's curated highlight. The work is the same. The life circumstances are often the same. The internal experience is different. And that difference, in a life lived over years and decades, compounds into something significant. One last thing. Patience is not the same as waiting. In a culture that has made speed into a virtue, faster results, faster delivery, faster feedback, faster everything, patience sounds like a character flaw, like someone who doesn't want things badly enough, like resignation dressed up as wisdom. But what I'm describing is not passive patience. It's the active, intentional, daily choice to do the work without demanding that the results arrive on your preferred timeline. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire for 19 years. He dealt with consequences, military, political, human, that played out over decades. And he wrote consistently about the long game, about the difference between what becomes clear today and what becomes clear over years. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. He's describing patience with integrity, the refusal to compromise what actually matters for faster results. The decision to keep building, slowly, correctly, without shortcuts, even when the comparison tells you that other people are further along. Because the further along they appear, in the comparison, at 7 a.m. on the phone, is not the same as where they actually are. The appearance and the reality are rarely identical. And even when they are, their reality has nothing to do with yours. Your path is yours. Your timeline is yours. Your measure is yours. Keep building, patiently, actively, on your own terms. So are millennials quietly giving up? Some are, and I understand it completely. I've been close to it. The exhaustion is real. The broken promises are real. The comparison-driven sense of perpetual inadequacy is real, and it is deliberately produced. But I think what looks like giving up is, for many people, something different. A recalibration. Slow, uncomfortable, often invisible. The process of separating what you were told to want from what you actually want. What someone else's measuring stick says from what your own measuring stick says. And that process, done honestly, done without rushing to false comfort, is not weakness. It might be the most important work of your adult life. You cannot control the housing market. You cannot control what your peers earn. You cannot control the algorithm, the economy, the generation that made decisions before you. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He said it plainly. Confine yourself to the present, not the comparison, not the regret, not the anxiety about where you're supposed to be by now. Just what you can do today, with what you have, where you are. That's enough. That's always been enough. Start there. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are right now. Not the public version, the honest one. I read everything. See you in the next one.